As of November 17, 2016, the global population stands at 7,465,020,315, and it is increasing rapidly. Despite this growth, around 884 million people lack access to safe drinking water, 1 billion do not meet minimum dietary requirements, and another billion are chronically malnourished. Approximately 2.6 billion people lack basic sanitation, and 25% of the earth remains untouched by human activity, mainly in desert, Arctic, tropical, or boreal zone. Overpopulation is a pressing global issue, with the world's population expected to reach at least 9 billion according to the UN's medium projection. The planet's resources are depleting rapidly, and every second, 9 lives are born, contributing to an annual increase of 140 million people. The concentrations of populations varies with 60% in Asia, 15% in Africa, and others distributed across continents. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today as we embark on a vital explorations into the study titled Overpopulations and the Impact on the Environment. I am Hiljoy Oro together with my co-researcher, Cassandra Godinez and Johncar Anta. The main goal of this study is to comprehensively investigate the issue of overpopulation and its far-reaching impacts on the environment, emphasizing historical roots and present-day consequences. The study aims to analyze the environmental, socio-economic, and global challenges posed by overpopulations, including its role in climate change, species extinction, and the perpetuations of inequality. Ultimately, the goal is to propose effective policy recommendations and advocate for global collaborations to address overpopulations and mitigate the adverse effects on humanity and planet. So let us collectively engage in this discourse, defending the significance of comprehending and addressing the implications of overpopulations on our environment. This chapter explored the historical roots of overpopulations, emphasizing the delicate balance between human existing and the ecosystem. Women's herbal perspective focuses on the role of Western man over 4 centuries, tracing humanity's evolution through nomadic, agrarian, technocratic phases. The shift from a coexistence with nature's predominance, influencing the Greek and Judaic beliefs, is examined. The causes of overpopulation, driven by the societal and cultural changes, are analyzed, incorporating case events like wars, diseases, birth control, eugenic, migrations, and policy shifts. As you can see, the graph provides a visual presentation of our world population growth, spanning from 500 BC to the projected figures for 2025, offering a snapshot of the historical correlations between events and demographic trends. The history of overpopulation from prehistoric time to the population bomb. The historical trajectory of the world's population is traced from the pre-agricultural times to the medieval period, beginning with around 1 million people dispersed across unexplored regions. The end of the Ice Age marked a shift in population, reaching 5 million during the Neolithic transition and growing to 50 million by 1000 BC. Agricultural practices increased food supply but decreased life expectancy, prompting discussions on populations controlled by Greek philosophers and later influencing Roman policies. While events like the Black Death in 14th century underscore the complex interplay between historical events and demographic changes. Colonial impact on population dynamics, varied colonization's density. So during the colonial era, the density of colonizations in North America varied among European nations, shaping demographic trend. British colonies, initially facing challenges in Jamestown, showed resilience with a significant populations increased by the mid-18th century. In contrast, French settlers in Canada experienced impressive growth due to the factors like younger marriages, higher birth rates, and longer life expectancy, emphasizing that the cultural and social factors, alongside challenges and the mortality rates, influence demographic patterns during this period. Thomas Robert Malthus, a prominent figure in sociocracy during the late 18th century, studied population dynamics and gained recognitions for his influential 1789 work, Essay on the Principle of Populations. Born in 1766 into a wealthy English family, Malthus had a diverse career as a poet and a professor of political economy.
His theory proposing that the populations tend to outgrow food supplies with geometric population growth and arithmetic food supply increase, influenced birth control policies but also sparked controversy, especially concerning the concept of the prettiest individuals. Despite critics from the figures like Engels and Marx, Malthus' legacy endures and fueling ongoing discussions about the accuracy and relevance of these theories. The following Thomas Robert Malthus population theories, Margaret Sanger emerged as a prominent leader in the birth control movement in the early 20th century, motivated by women's rights issues and the tragic consequences of unsafe abortions. Sanger passionately advocated for women's control over their bodies, facing oppositions from the Catholic Church and societal norms. Despite arrest and imprisonment, Sanger's pioneering efforts laid the groundwork for the broader birth control movement, challenging norms and promoting women's autonomy and reproductive choices. The concept of eugenics, introduced by Francis Galton in 1865, marked the beginning of the scientific movement aimed at improving a race through genetic manipulations. Inspired by Alfred Russel Wallace's theory of natural selections, Galton believed that the upper class developed superior traits influenced by the brain. His study of the Royal Society scientists led him to assert their noble families lacked desirable characteristics, while the poor and uneducated masses did not, prompting Galton to propose the disappearance of the lower class as a solution to what he perceived as societal unfitness. Raymond Pearl, a biologist in the early 20th century, initially supported eugenics as a solution to overpopulations and a means of global dominance through population control. However, his views evolved, leading him to challenge eugenics by criticizing the concept of biological superiority and emphasizing genetic complexities. The era witnessed both widespread support for population control, with unexpected advocates like Margaret Sanger, and state-sponsored sterilizations notably legalized in Virginia in 1927, as well as the global spread of eugenics to Nazi Germany, resulting in mass killings. The post-war period continued to reflect the impact of eugenics, with a rise in sterilizations law in the United States and Scandinavia, underscoring the enduring controversy surrounding his historical chapter. The demographic dynamics of the United States have been significantly influenced by the migrations throughout history, starting with Columbus' discovery and continuing through waves of immigrations after the global events like the Revolutionary War and the French Revolution. Patterns shifted from the northern to southern European and Asian immigrants, leading to legislative responses such as the Chinese Exclusion Act and the Gentleman's Agreement with Japan. Post-World War II, immigrations policies adapted to the geopolitical shift and changes, and the data reveals the substantial impact on the population growth, with immigrations contributing to 61% increase in the U.S. population since the 1950s. Current statistics show legal immigrants constituting 12% of the total populations, with projections suggesting a potential double by 2050, sparking ongoing discussions and controversies about the migration role in shaping the demographic fabric of the United States. The population dam addresses the challenges posed by the rapid global population increase, particularly after the World War II, with a focus on high fertility regions like Africa, Asia, and South America. Biologists Paul Ehrlich warns of a potential famine due to unchecked population growth and proposes urgent solutions, including financial incentives for childless couples and penalties for larger families. While advocating for global corporations and government involvement, Ehrlich acknowledged the complexities involving cultural and religious belief, emphasizing the need of the sustainable population growth and addressing the multifaceted challenges through cultural, economic, and policies changes.
What are the causes of overpopulation?
This chapter explores historical causes of overpopulation and focuses on China and India's coercive population control policies addressing the impact on human rights. It highlights the challenges arising from poverty and illiteracy, hindering effective family planning. Additionally, the chapter analyzes the United States abortion policy and provides a historical overview of abortion procedures. the influence of the Catholic Church on population control and reproductive rights is briefly discussed, emphasizing the broader context of religious ideologies. As suggested by Chinese scientist John Song, the China's extreme family planning policy is implemented in 1978 to curb the population growth. The policy involves strict government monitoring, mandatory monthly gynecological exams for women, and incentives such as paid vacations for those opting for abortion. Furthermore, parents with one child receive priority in housing, better healthcare, and educational opportunities, while families with the second child had to pay back those benefits. And those who had more than two children would have to pay back by 10% for 14 years. Moreover, according to Vanessa Baird, the international community, including organizations like UNFPA and IPPF, continued to support China's program despite the reports of human rights abuses. However, in responses to public pressure, aid grants were eventually cut. The statement includes statistics on abortions, sterilizations, and IUD insertions carried out under the policy. So this is the China's population before and after one-child policy. As of 2016, India holds the position of being the world's second most populous country with a population of 1.3 billion people. Despite these advancements in agriculture, the growing population poses challenges to achieving an acceptable standard of living. Mahatma Gandhi called attention to population growth and relied on abstinence as a solution. However, the government was first in the world to establish family planning program involving birth control and then moving on to sterilizations. And when this policy turned out to be ineffective, the government ordered sterilizations of men with more than 3 children. But it soon expanded to sterilizations of even homeless and beggars. And furthermore, according to Nathan A. Song, up to 80 million vasectomies were performed in India in 1976. Government incentives for sterilization attracted mainly the poor, and nearly 2/3 of India's 100 million married women still did not use birth control. Therefore, the combination of a poor economy and a low standard of living resulted in an annual population increase of 15 million. The U.S. policy on population control provides an overview of the historical development of U.S. population control policies. The unintentional contribution to population growth by the Rockefeller Foundation, which aimed to enhance global agriculture and health. However, proposals for population control face opposition from Catholic and communist countries. Under President Eisenhower, the administration was addressed as immoral for willing to invest money into planning and executing birth control. The President was worried about the problem but chose not to argue with church because elections for his second term were coming up. And during Kennedy's term, research on the birth control began, and the Agency for International Development was assigned to work with foreign governments and private organizations on the issue of growing population. In 1960s, the United States cut off funding for abortion and doubled investment for international population programs under President Carter's administration. In 1984, President Reagan's administration declared that population growth was not a problem for development, and announced that it would no longer support any private or UN agency that advocated abortions. In 1993, President Bill Clinton legalized abortions, and by the turn of the century, the global focus shifted to women's rights. Also, according to David Howard, the International Conference on Population and Development in Cairo emphasized NGO involvement and framed population issues in terms of reproductive health and women's rights. However, The neo-Malthusian perspective criticized this approach, arguing that it neglected resource limitations and lacked medical feasibility in underdeveloped countries. Abortion versus religion. During the 19th and 20th centuries, the process of giving birth frequently presented as a considerable threat to infants. This led women expecting delivery complications to undergo secret abortions as a way to protect themselves. Moreover, as medical advancements rendered abortion unnecessary for saving lives, it evolved a contentious ethical issue, particularly in the context of overpopulation concerns. Despite fierce opposition, abortion remains most widely used form of birth control globally. The Catholic Church strongly opposed contraception. However, women worldwide asserted the right to control their bodies. In Latin countries where 70% of Catholic women use contraception, also the Western European nations has the lowest fertility rates. While global abortion rates declined, Africa experienced an increase with only 100,000 out of 5.6 million procedures conducted safely. Therefore, the socio-economic factors such as poverty, lack of education, and social norms contribute to high abortion rates in Africa, where women may opt for unsafe practices due to economic hardships and cultural attitudes.
Good day everyone, good day Sir Geoffrey Marfa. My name is Johncar and Anta, and I will be reporting the Chapter 3 of our research report, which focuses on the effects of overpopulation. Now, this chapter focuses on the observed effects of human overpopulation to animals, plants, nature, economy, humans, and the earth. It highlights the major factors as well as the statistics conducted for the impact of overpopulation. Now, the first impact seen for this phenomena is the degradation of the environment, and this includes the factors about urbanization, carbon dioxide and greenhouse effect, and global warming. Now let's first tackle urbanization. The fertility rate in urban areas is low due to a broad range of opportunities offered to women compared to rural areas. Now, more economic opportunities, a better access to education, expansive programs of family planning, and inadequate healthcare all have an impact on women's decision over reproduction. Now, an example of this can be seen in the urban fertility rates in Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda, which have around 40% lower than rural rates and well below the national averages. According to statistics, 6.5 billion people will live in cities within 2050, and more than half the world's total population today. Nevertheless, migration from countryside and expansion of villages into cities are factors that contribute to urban growth. According to statistics, 6.5 billion will have to live in the cities by 2050, which is more than the world's total population in the present. Next is, cities create 80% of greenhouse gases and contribute 30 to 40% of carbon footprints emissions. Now, this is explained as the urban heat island effect, under which rural surroundings have lower air and surface temperature than the urban counterparts. The main causal factors of the effect are architectures of the city, especially the high-rise buildings that trap heat, the size of urban area, and the land covered with surfaces impervious to water, such as buildings and roads, as well as aquatic and vegetation lands. Next is, urbanization contributes drastically to eutrophication, or an increase in chemical nutrients in the water resources, which occurs due to urban production of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases and pollutants that wash off impervious surfaces into water resources. The process ultimately pollutes the quality of water and affects the marine ecosystems. Now, this is a consequence of developing countries undergoing rapid urbanization without implementing environmental protections and identifying modern chemicals that deteriorate infrastructure. Next is, human activity is devastating for the biodiversity. The growth of cities pushes animals out of their habitats that are becoming urbanized. Now, US scientists say that the Earth is in its midst of its sixth mass extinction of plants and animals, with nearly 50% of all species disappearing. Now, half the world's mammals, including primate and marine, declines in population, and around 36% faced extinction, according to the International Union for Conservation of Nature as of present. Air quality suffers as well. Now, pollution released into atmosphere from factories, households, and automobiles is far greater than the environment can sustain. This particularly refers to developing countries, such as urban areas of Asian countries, where leaded gasoline is widely used, compared to developed countries that manage to decrease their automotive lead emissions. Another factor of the degradation for the environment is carbon dioxide and greenhouse effect. And this includes the increase in carbon dioxide and decrease in ozone in the atmosphere. The burning of wood, coal, and oil, along with volcanic eruptions and respiration process of animals, plants, and microorganisms, are compounds that produce carbon dioxide. Now, for the longest time, this process or the emission of carbon dioxide in the environment has been balanced by nature, since there hasn't been much percentage of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere then. But since the start of industrial revolution made by humans, this led us to heavily rely on energy produced from burning fossil fuels. As forests are abundant of carbon, deforestation allowed humans to leave their trace in environmental pollution. The loss of forest cover has significantly increased in the past few hundred years. But tropical rainforests in Brazil, Indonesia, and Zaire are under a special spotlight, as these rainforests are being destroyed at the rate of 100 acres a minute, or 52.6 million acres a year. Next is 1% of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has a significant impact on the global temperature. In 1890s, a Swedish Nobel Prize winner, Scott Arrhenius, was the first one to observe the effect of carbon dioxide in temperature, and he coined the term greenhouse effect, which is an increase in temperature of the earth that warms up as greenhouse that traps solar heat. Now, the process of greenhouse effect starts when carbon dioxide traps the heat energy in Earth's atmosphere, and the Earth is then heated by the sun, and it emits energy back into space, but some of the energy gets trapped before it reaches the space, and the temperature of the atmosphere increases. Now, even though China is the biggest polluter, the United States takes up the second place, as its economy is built on fossil fuels, which is actually a major contributor for the greenhouse gases in the whole world. Now, the third factor for the degradation of the environment is global warming. Now, global temperatures have increased for 1 degree Fahrenheit since the last 20th century, and it's still continuing to rise in the present. Despite the widespread debate and controversy about global warming as a potential threat to our environment, experts provide statistics to show that Earth is in danger. An example of this is the Montañas Glacier National Park, which has less than 30 glaciers in the present, whereas it actually has 150 glaciers before. Another is the Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania snow have melted to 80% of its snow since 1912, and it is expected to melt, or the snow could be completely disappear by 2020s. Next we have the rise of carbon emission in the atmosphere has devastating impact on climate change. Now here I quote for current events. By 2080, people going hungry in the world could increase between 140 million and 1 billion, and diseases like fever, heat-related deaths, malaria, and other illnesses are far more likely to occur, and this is due to the increase of global temperature. Now, the demand of energy is predicted to double, and the wealthy nations will use as much energy as their population will grow in the next couple of decades. And as for this, it can most likely be that the developing countries or the third world countries will likely to suffer the most for this consequence. Now that we're done with the first impact of global overpopulation, let us proceed on second impact, which is the lack of resources and food. And this include the scarcity of food and a shortage of water. Let us first tackle the scarcity of food. Now, there is actually a direct relationship between the number of people on the planet and the amount of food. Now, each individual needs at least 2,000 to 3,000 calories diet daily, where diet is balanced and nutrients filled. As the number of people grows, the demand of food ultimately rises. According to Paul Ehrlich, here I quote, "The race between population and food can never be won." And although the UN claimed that the world produces enough grain to feed humans 3,500 calories every day, statistics proved different, and it shows that 950 million people were hungry and over a billion of people more couldn't get enough nutrients to support good health. Next, we have inequality in the production and distribution of food. Giant agricultural corporations operate to maximize their profits by placing food in areas where people have financial ability to buy it. Now, this means that the wealthier the economy or the country is, the more privileged they are for food productions or food resources, whereas developing countries or third world countries were more likely to suffer for this since they are not the priority for food productions or food resources. Now, the second factor for the lack of resources is a shortage of water. Now, the growth of global population resulted in the pressure on water, the only valuable resource that has finite rate of supply. Now, in the past half of the century, humans used one half of the resource, which signifies that a strict amount will remain available in the next half of the century. The impact will be dreadful in developing countries that rely on water for crops, to fight persistent malnutrition and starvation. Nevertheless, the shortage of water is already experienced worldwide, as more than one-third of all people on Earth live in areas where water is in short supply, and 1.7 billion reside in regions where chronic water shortages hinder crop productions and economic development. Next is the demand for water increases faster than the population itself. Now, between 1950 and 1980, worldwide water use more than tripled, and in the United States, it increased by 150% during the 30-year period. And although the country's population only grew by 50%, the water is actually needed as individual needs to consume water daily. There are three fundamental ways that people use water on a daily basis. And the first one is for domestic use, such as drinking, cooking, bathing, washing, and sanitation. Next is industrial use for power plants and factories. And the third or the one with the biggest factor that uses water, is for agricultural use of water. And this is most especially for irrigation of crops. Now, about 80% of human diseases are related to unsafe drinking water and substandard sanitation. Contaminated water forms bacterial illnesses such as cholera, polio, and infectious hepatitis, but it also contains parasites and toxic chemicals that lead to cancer and neurological diseases. So this just meant that water is a very precious resource to us, and overpopulation actually has a big impact on the shortage of water supply. Next is population growth exceeds the total amount of water, which makes it a non-renewable source. The underground reservoir has been filling for over 1,000 years by the rainfall cycle, but nowadays most of them are empty and contaminated. An example of increased demand on wells is the Gaza Strip, located between Israel and Egypt, where the aquifer has been half emptied since humans reside in the area. Now, as the fresh water became depleted, salty water from the Mediterranean Sea entered the well and left it contaminated. Not only are humans excessively taking away natural resources necessary for their survival, but they are also destroying habitats of animals in the run. Now, the third and last impact for the overpopulation can be observed in the economy, and specifically for the jobs and quality of life. Here we have global population growth costs a boost of labor demand. Now, according to Brown, since the 1950s, the world's labor force has more than doubled from 1.2 billion to 2.7 billion, outstripping the growth in job creation. Now, in order to employ population surplus, more than 1.9 billion jobs will have to be formed in the developing world. Consequently, an increase in labor demand will give rise to labor supply, and as a result, this decreases wages for the people. Next is quality of life has increased due to family planning programs that enabled population decline in some developing countries. Now, incomes have risen due to family planning programs that have enabled population decline in South Korea, Taiwan, China, Indonesia, and Malaysia. Now, this just meant that for developing countries or countries that have increased knowledge regarding population and education in general, have an impact on or have contributed to the changing mentality of family planning, and therefore has an impact on the decline of population growth, and this can be observed for these mentioned countries.
That will be all for the chapter 3. Now let us proceed to the chapter 4, which will be presented by my co-member of this research report.
Solutions to overpopulation. The main question of addressing the issue of overpopulation is how to come to grips with the issue that is growing above its limits. For a global population change to be seen, international institutions must set goals for domestic institutions to accomplish within their 43 own borders. This seems impossible, as certain countries aim to reduce carbon emissions while others utilize natural resources to acquire material gain. However, if nations force each other to ratify treaties for the well-being of the global community, then the world is already one step ahead to control environmental degradation. National versus international institutions. Even though climate change as a result of overpopulation is a global issue that crosses borders, national institutions possess more power to regulate carbon emissions compared to international institutions. While international institutions serve as guides to national institutions in fulfilling their goals, domestic institutions have more legitimacy than global structures, and enforcement is more effective as they are. The disadvantages of domestic institutions lie in the non-existence of barriers in communicating policies, because nations have common values and a common culture, which simplifies policy implementing. However, global institutions are crucial in addressing challenges of population growth and economic growth. Thus, a national and local institutions need to be powerful with their own territory in order for global governance to be effective, as institutions build on each other in layers. Governance and sustainability. Densely populated cities often experience a decrease in carbon emissions through the promotion of shared public transportation and a reduction in private car usage. According to Ian Golden, China, as the world's second largest economy and largest carbon emitter, has set goals to reduce its industrial energy demand by 20% in 2020 while increasing productivity. Therefore, technological innovations play a crucial role in addressing urban challenges. But the transformation of these innovations into practical solutions necessitates the implementation of regulations, investments in research, and market incentives. In response to a growing demand for food and water, international agencies and organizations have implemented projects to help nations deal with consequences of climate change. But the core of the problem is grounded in unequal distribution of sources. However, despite collaborative efforts, the sustainability of the global community is at risk. The challenge is not resource scarcity, but the unequal access to them. To address this, there is a call for a fundamental shift towards a new economy. This new approach should be built on clean and renewable energy sources, the conservation of biological diversity, and cooperation with natural systems to sustain a reasonable global population. The environmental system is overloaded and the humanity's footprint is breaking it down. Air and water pollution have reached critical levels, posing health risks to individuals. Oceans suffer from pollution as they have been treated as dumping grounds for sewage and toxins over the years. Urban areas contribute significantly to this problem, affecting both the ecosystem and coastal residents. Despite this, a lower population could potentially slow down the pace of environmental degradation, offering governments more time to implement preventive measures. Experts assert that the interconnected nature of global environmental issues necessitates addressing the root problem of overpopulation. Resolving this fundamental issue is seen as a crucial finding solutions to various environmental challenges within the intricate web of connections in the global ecosystem. A number of studies have shown that educating women decreases fertility rate in a given country. According to Rebecca Stiefhoff, women who are more educated are more likely to use effective methods of birth control. In Europe and North America, where women have higher levels of education and more equal rights, fertility rates are notably lower compared to Latin America, Asia, and Africa. Historically, Western societies had higher fertility rates, but the implementation of laws ensuring equal rights for women led to delayed marriages and subsequently fewer children. Effective policy on population control. While the United States has formulated population control policies, many other nations have not effectively addressed the issue of population growth. Demographers and experts argue that a strict policy is essential to tackle excessive population growth. China, in contrast to other nations, implemented a controversial coercive one-child policy. This policy supporting abortion but prohibiting officials from forcing it on unwilling women. It has been criticized in Western world due to China's history of coercion and abuse, as well as concerns about individual rights. Experts argue that government worldwide should adopt comprehensive reproductive health care encompassing family planning and affordable, pre-maternal and health care to address the complex issue of population growth effectively.
Good day everyone, my name is Johncar and Anta, and I'm here to discuss the conclusion of our research report. Now, there are four main apocalyptic risks facing us, and these include: first, the rising greenhouse gas emissions that cause global warming. Second is the nuclear weapons, which are thought to be the sole weapon available in the event of war, especially on present times. Third is the population expansion and demographic changes that reduce the size of the political and economic landscape. And lastly, access to international discussions and controversies that are sparked by the energy crisis. Now, since overpopulation is not the only global threat we can see in our world today, it is possible that the apocalypse is coming at a faster rate than ever if we do not find solutions for these issues, especially overpopulation. Now, technology is believed to be the only factor that may save our planet from discussions. Although technology is up for debate, since many people also thought that technology can be the destruction of our planet, because it is said to believe that technology may make or break us. The real answer to the problem of overpopulation and the apocalyptic future is in determining how best to use natural resources and financial resources in a way that maintains sustainability and influences future reproduction rates. Should humanity give up on the struggle against overpopulation, this problem might be the reason why the world ends. So it is best for us humans to know and to find balance in how do we overcome overpopulation so that we will not suffer the consequence, which is the apocalypse in the future. That is all. Thank you.